Hello, and welcome to this expert talk on connecting and managing Microsoft resources with Azure Sentinel. Today, Shannon and I are going to be continuing our security conversation. This is number 7 in a series of 8, so we're on the home stretch here on our series here around cloud security. My name is Dwayne Natwick. I am a cloud training architect lead at Opsagility. I'm also a Microsoft MCT regional lead and an Azure MVP. I have multiple cloud-based certifications, including many of the security certifications within Azure and Microsoft 365. Feel free to reach out to me. My email address at Opsagility is on this slide, as well as my personal blog and my social media accounts. Feel free to follow me, and I provide a lot of times good information around security, as well as share information from a lot of peers and colleagues out there in the Azure and Microsoft 365 world.
And I'm Shannon Kuehn. I am a senior cloud advocate at Microsoft. So in my role, I spend a lot of time working on community outreach with enterprise digital transformation. So our main goal is to try and demystify how to use Azure most correctly within your enterprise across a number of different platforms and tools. So I'm a Microsoft certified trainer as well. I'm also a Microsoft certified professional. I'm an 8 times Azure certified professional. So that's kind of a crazy reality. I realized that when I was re-upping my certifications this year. It's a lot of certifications to kind of keep current over time. I'm also ITIL version 3 certified and VMware certified as well. So I'm very active on social media, just like Dwayne. Feel free to connect with me on Twitter or LinkedIn. I tend to share a lot of good content there. And any blog posts that I will write, I'll share there as well. But yeah, that's my background. That's kind of who I am. And we'll start digging into today's talk. So first things first, we'll talk about the scenario. We'll introduce the scenario, kind of where we are right now in the scheme of things. We'll talk about why you would choose Azure Sentinel. We'll then discuss how it works. We'll talk about the Microsoft Intelligent Security Graph. And then we'll dip into the Security Operations Center, or the SOC, right? I think a lot of folks are familiar with the NOC, the Network Operations Center. We'll talk a little bit about the Security Operations Center and what roles they encompass. So let's talk about the introduction. So organizations are faced with an incredibly difficult task, and it's gotten even more and more difficult as time has unfolded, especially with the global pandemic. We are dealing with an expanded digital estate. Doesn't matter what enterprise you're a part of, whether you're a small company or a large company. So the move to cloud and a mobile workforce has pushed the border of your estate beyond what you normally would think of 5, 10, 15 years ago. So your data and users are everywhere, and the systems that they use to access resources are everywhere. So meanwhile, the frequency and sophistication of attacks are ever growing. Everything from social engineering to DDoS attacks to any sort of credential attack, right? So regardless of the size of your organization, you're a target. It doesn't matter what IP you hold. It doesn't matter what vertical you live in. You're a target now. And Microsoft believes that, we're uniquely equipped to help if you choose to move your assets and your workforce into Azure and Office 365. So the traditional security operation center challenges, they really surround the idea of attack techniques, attack frequency, and attack complexity are evolving very quickly. So security teams are under strain from the expanding breadth of defensive technologies. Cloud adoption has accelerated, especially during this global pandemic. There's borderless zero trust networks as well. So things are evolving and shifting and changing, and security teams are trying to catch up. So threats continue to grow in complexity and they're volumed. So a typical attack could be a multi-pronged attack that isn't just trying to expose a password. It could be a number of different ways to get into an environment. I think everybody's familiar with the SolarWinds hack. That's one of those. And then you see alert fatigue as well. So sometimes you've got a very chatty something, could be a network device. It's issuing out alerts pretty readily, Well, wouldn't it be easier if you could somehow move those together and sort of aggregate that? It's tougher if you think about the way in which customers would deploy security tooling, because there isn't really that great unified sort of single pane of glass. And then there's a shortage of security analysts with experience, right? I think Dwayne could definitely echo in here. His expertise is unique, but it's in kind of demand, right? It's hard to find that talent. So it's a tough reality that customers of any size are being faced with. And it's one of those things where, if you're not familiar with how to think through your investigation, the tool chain you're using, it could be a very time-consuming reality. So the current solutions themselves really aren't architected well for today's demands. So, legacy on-prem SIEMs, or security incident event management systems, they're really harder to maintain. They don't really have kind of cloud native technology or any artificial intelligence baked in. Storage and compute needs to be optimized. Usually it runs on a server. It's just harder if you're thinking about folks that are moving to the cloud, choosing to use more cloud native tools, moving from IaaS to PaaS to SaaS-based solutions. So it's a hard reality for traditional security operations center folks. If you think about it, the cloud can help. So inside of Microsoft's realm, we have tried to simplify and make security easy to manage. So somebody like me, who doesn't have a CISSP, could come in and help out and start to triage and kind of figure out where the problems are within an environment. So if you harness the power of the cloud, you can start to free up your SecOps teams a little bit. Right? They can focus on IT work, a little bit more streamlined approaches, sort of help in that realm. And then the next generation of AI and automation in the cloud also help supercharge that work. So you're not dealing with alert fatigue. You're able to gather events together. You can then start on hunting investigations to try and figure out exactly what's going on in the environment to hopefully mitigate an attack before it becomes a very costly attack, right? So the idea here is to lean on cloud and artificial intelligence to start to help that process along. And this is why Microsoft reimagined the Security Incident Event Management solution, or the SIEM, as well as the SOAR, the Security Orchestration, Automation, and Response tooling. So Sentinel is the product in which that we have built with the cloud in mind, as well as artificial intelligence, or AI. So it makes it easy to collect security data across your entire hybrid estate, right? Doesn't have to be just Azure. It could be on-prem. It could be a different cloud. It's nice to see a number of different ways that this tool can aggregate events. It could be events on servers, user events, server events, different PaaS-based environment events. It uses the power of AI to ensure you're identifying real threats quickly, and it unleashes you from the burden of traditional SIEMs by eliminating the need to spend time on kind of setting it up, maintaining and scaling infrastructure, because this is very much so a PaaS solution that you're just essentially onboarding by way of deploying a couple of pieces inside of Azure, or enabling those pieces inside of Azure, and then you're just collecting log data, and then Azure Sentinel helps out by kind of tying in artificial intelligence to help out with aggregation of your log data. So it's kind of a cooler reality, and you've got the idea that you could easily integrate with existing tools as well. So if there is a tool in your tool belt that you'd like to bring into Azure, there's probably an integration component that you could think through with Azure Sentinel. You can also bring your Office 365 data for free. That's a cool reality, especially given the fact that usually when you think about ingesting log data from multiple platforms, there's probably a price tag involved. You can ingest that for free. You're only paying for what you store and what you consume on a daily basis. And it essentially is a limitless cloud speed and scale. And then you've got, faster threat protection with AI by your side.
All right. So why are we choosing Azure Sentinel? And Shannon hit on a few of those topics there in the previous slide. Very powerful tool to harness the power of the cloud, as both a and just to clarify, there's two different pronunciations that are out there in the IT world for a security information and events management system. Some people call it a SIEM, some people call it a SIEM. I generally call it a SIEM. So,
Okay.
But it's, and some people get very passionate about pronunciations of acronyms, but I'm not going to worry about it. But if you hear me call it a SIEM, I'm still talking about Azure Sentinel.
Sure.
But Azure Sentinel is exactly that. They've taken the ability of a SIEM to help with creating your security operations center and put it in the cloud, put AI around it, and all of these automation tools to also do that orchestration and automation response as well. So it makes it very powerful. If anybody's ever tried to or worked to put a system in place and create your own security operations center from scratch in an on-premises environment with on-premises type software and tools, you need a lot of power and a lot of scale to be able to process and store and manage all these logs that are coming in. So just like one of the benefits of the cloud, for many things, the point of entry and ease of entry into getting a SIEM in place with utilizing Azure Sentinel is incredibly efficient and effective from doing it, from purchasing software, purchasing hardware that's going to house that software, training your organization. Generally, there's hours and hours of professional services time from a consultant to get it up and running. Azure Sentinel, as you'll see some things when we get into the actual environment, is really a very quick entry point to get things up and running and start gathering logs and log data in one central point. And that's really what we're getting here in terms of Azure Sentinel. Is there's no infrastructure setup and maintenance. It's all available and ties into all of the services within the Azure portal. You can scale very easily. There's no limits. The only limit is really what you can bear in terms of cost. And Azure Sentinel also provides, a pay-as-you-go. But once you hit certain gates, there's actual discounts in the amount of, depending on the amount of log data that you're ingesting. So there's, so it is ready to scale at that cloud level, that Azure level, without any restraints on you from hardware or processing. Everything's done, and it's essentially a SaaS-based service within Azure. That just runs, grabs the logs, and you can then build your tooling and build your automation and everything as you go along. It can help you reduce, obviously, those infrastructure costs. You only pay for what you use. Again, the data from Office 365, you're already collecting that data anyway. That data is part of your Office 365 costs, and bringing that data and those logs into Azure Sentinel is no cost at all. So again, we're super cloud, super scalable and cloud native 100% in terms of this. There's no upfront commitment, so you can come in, you can try it. If you find that it's too costly on a monthly basis, you can just turn the service off. It's there is no commitment or tie-in to Azure Sentinel. So it's very, you can go in and work with it, determine what you want to do with it, and how it's going to help you as an organization with threat hunting and understanding vulnerabilities and anomalies in your environment, and go from there. And really, all of these sources, and we've mentioned, the Microsoft 365 services coming in for free, connecting those data services. You've got Azure Active Directory. You have, it's pre-wired for all of those Microsoft native cloud services, so you can tie all of that in there very quickly and easily. It also ties to AWS CloudTrail, GCP. GCP suite as well, Cloud Suite for GCP, as well as Google, as well as the Google Cloud Suite. You can ingest that information in there, as well as hundreds of other industry leaders in security capabilities, both from like firewalls from Cisco and appliances, Palo Alto, threat detection and antivirus, anti-malware software from Symantec and Trend Micro, all have native connectors within Azure Sentinel, as well as if you don't find one of those services, or one of those, or a manufacturer, or a security provider that you might utilize, you can very easy still ingest those logs with a little bit of configuration, and we'll show you within the portal how easy and directed this is in terms of connecting these third-party data sources to Azure Sentinel. Every one of them that are vetted out within Sentinel actually gives you a step-by-step document and step-by-step requirements that you need to get them connected very rather quickly. So what does it do, and what are some of the powerful pieces to Azure Sentinel that kind of sets it apart? And the key things here that is that Microsoft has their AI approaches, their machine learning, that is all part of the overall ecosystem of Microsoft's cloud at this point. They have those services that you can utilize to build machine learning models and different AI capabilities like chatbots and language analysis and all those things. But it's also tied deeply into the threat and vulnerability analysis within Microsoft services, and all those models all go through, and all of that learning and that best practices and their global threat intelligence all ties into that threat detection and analysis piece, to understand what's happening within your environment, and understand from those models, and build these models even through your own usage of your services, to understand where anomalies lie, when, and alert you on different behaviors that might be different than what is the usual, and set up incidents and alerts very easily around, and possible automation steps to take when those anomalies are found, to avoid potential threats from becoming larger issues within your environment. And so all of this being integrated and built in right out of the box, you have a lot of capabilities that in a typical on-premises type SIEM type solution, you don't have these capabilities. You have to build these yourselves. It comes right out of the box and is, again, fully scalable, just like most Azure cloud-based services. And as Shannon mentioned before, when you're sifting through logs and trying to find anomalies and threats in logs, there's a level of human error and alert fatigue. Logs are very boring. It's not an exciting thing to be going through. And what these capabilities within Azure Sentinel do is reduce that alert fatigue by 90% by bubbling up those potential threats, and those logs that may be the source. They identify the sources of those threats up to the top, so that you can very easily investigate if a threat has infiltrated your environment. So Shannon, I think you're going to talk about how does that work after I provided all those words.
Yeah, so if you think about Azure Sentinel, there's a number of different data connectors, right? So everything in Azure has a connection point, everything from a VM to an app service to Azure SQL, any of the networking components, APIM, etc. You can also take a look at users. You can take a look at maybe a full-blown application, the full end-to-end architecture. Maybe you've got that web front end, that middle tier, the database tier. You can think about that being one point of log generation. You can also have different public clouds be a data connector. So GCP, AWS, Oracle, IBM, I believe, right? So they can all have connection points into Azure Sentinel, on top of the fact that you also have great integration points with third-party solutions. Semantics down there, Cisco, Fortinet, Palo Alto, Checkpoint. These all provide great, usually it's networking components that you'll want to have send those log files into Sentinel. So that's an option for you. And then once everything gets into Sentinel, that's where the cooler pieces come out. You have capacity to think through some visualization, so you can create cool dashboards. I often feel like dashboards are what your C-level folks like to see because of the fact that visually they can understand if something is in a bad shape faster than reading through log files. And so, you've got great ways of leaning on dashboards or workbooks. And then you've got the ability to add machine learning in. So you can turn on user entity behavioral analytics, and I won't be able to turn it on in my environment. You have to have a specific role. It's either global administrator or security administrator. And at Microsoft, I don't handle that, right? I just do what I do to showcase where you set it up, right? But it's great because the machine learning algorithms will be able to detect if a user account has been compromised. If all of a sudden they're logging in from a different environment to a different server that they normally don't even touch ever, right? So there's that machine learning piece that you can throw into the mix there, as well as just behavioral analytics surrounding the ways that applications interact, right? The different pieces of it. And then the data ingestion piece is really what gives you the visualizations, the machine learning pieces, and it all gets stored in a log analytics workspace. So that's your data repository. Once everything's in there and you start to correlate events, you can think about threat hunting. So there are predefined queries that you can use. So just like with log analytics or Azure Monitor, you're leaning on the Kusto query language. And so you may not be super familiar with it, right? I know I'm still feeling like I might be at an intermediate level. The great piece is, though, there are these predefined queries. You don't have to start from scratch. You could either lean on the predefined queries in the portal, or there's a community aspect as well that I'll talk about a little bit later in this slide. And then you've got the ability to think through automation, right? Maybe you want to just disable an account if all of a sudden they're trying to access 5 different servers across multiple different geographies. You might want to invoke a playbook that just disables that user account and maybe logs a ticket, which then leads into the integration pieces, right? So you could think about having ServiceNow being integrated. There's quite a bit of integration from third-party tooling all up. So if there's a vendor that you're really excited to have, you like it from the perspective of the way that it provides you security, I guess, it gives you an understanding on your security posture. Most likely there's an integration point, whether it's GA or in public previews, I guess remains to be seen. But the idea here is we're trying to play nice with everybody. So there, in theory, would be an integration for those tools in the event that you need to bring them into Azure. The community piece, though, is the thing I really enjoy talking about because you're dealing with technology that maybe you're not familiar with. So the idea of creating a workbook, leaning on these machine learning notebooks, because you can lean on the pre-baked pieces of this or the pre-configured pieces of machine learning, or you can add your own, and there are templates that you can build off of. I'm not a machine learning person, so it's nice to have these templates to pull from, as well as to have the community that can help out on that front, right? So there's a fantastic GitHub repo that lives in the Microsoft Azure larger repo that gets updated pretty regularly. And if you're really savvy and you like to build things out and contribute, it's open sourced and community driven. So if you start playing around with Sentinel and you like certain components and you figure out a way to have data being, I guess, displayed a specific way, or you build a query that you think does a better job than some of the queries that live in that repo, you can always commit to that repo and, create a PR. And our folks at Microsoft, the people that handle that repo, will go through that PR review, and they'll work with you to get that committed into the repo as it stands. So it's a kind of a cool reality in the sense that it's open source. Microsoft is leaning on the community for help and assistance, because that expertise doesn't just live in Seattle, where Microsoft, or the Redmond office, right, where Microsoft is headquartered. That expertise is very vast and global. So having a GitHub repo to lean on helps out quite a bit. So in terms of the architecture, I talked about it. So the Log Analytics Workspace is the backend. So if you're familiar with Log Analytics, the way in which you position it with Azure Monitor and the way in which you position it with aggregation of logs, the same concept will exist in this world. In fact, I was confused at first when I realized Sentinel did this, because I thought this sort of muddied the water. And I guess it doesn't, because you've got to think that it's got to ingest logs from somewhere. And the best spot for it to do that is a Log Analytics Workspace. So, the technology that's used, it's the Azure Data Explorer technology. That's what, that's where like the storage comes in, the different ways of handling the table organization, the different schemas. So these backends are ultra scalable, and you get back results fairly quickly, unless you're doing a pretty broad search. I'll showcase some of that inside of the demo today. When you set up Azure Sentinel for the first time, it allows you to create a new Log Analytics Workspace, or you can choose an existing Log Analytics Workspace. It's really up to you. Sometimes customers like that line of delineation. Sometimes customers don't care, because now you can place permissions on a Log Analytics Workspace where specific business units can be permissioned to only see the things that they need to see, right? Same with security operations folks. Maybe they only need to see specific environments, things that are running in production, right? Or maybe they're junior level, they only need to see a lower end environment, right? There's great ways of permissioning your Log Analytics Workspace. So many times customers now pick one Log Analytics Workspace for all of the Azure Monitor pieces, as well as Log Analytics pieces, and then Azure Sentinel. And then if you think about it, the dashboards are really pulling from that log data. You've got actionable security recommendations, both with Azure Security Center, because that's also leaning on Log Analytics, the Log Analytics Workspace, as well as you've got investigation tools and log search. So there's some really interesting pieces here in terms of having Log Analytics be that vessel for log aggregation. If you think about the data sources, so as we've talked about, all the Azure services can be ingested into Azure Sentinel. That's Dynamics, that's Office 365, everything in that world, Intune, right? As well as anything in Azure, so app services, any of the APIM, Azure Firewall, any of the VMs, right? Because that extension will get applied to that VM, and those logs can be sent to Azure Sentinel. But it can also capture data from other clouds. I've worked with customers who love the fact that Log Analytics can capture data from different environments. So the idea that Sentinel can be extended into that security space, maybe for a bunch of GCP environments that maybe you haven't thought through full-blown monitoring and security analysis, you could think about Azure Sentinel being a spot for those log files to show up. There's Barracuda, semantic compatibility and integration, as well as Fortinet, Checkpoint, Cisco, Palo Alto, F5. So it gets interesting, right? The idea that you could think about monitoring and taking a look at security posture across a lot of different of these environments, whereas prior to, you probably had multiple different solutions. Azure Sentinel really does that, provide that single pane of glass where you can view, detect, manage, investigate, respond, and hunt, right? So these are great features, and it's one of the reasons why I really like a lot of the Azure native tooling, because usually when it comes down to it, customers want to pick what's familiar, and maybe there's a conversation point that they have to have in terms of, do we move this into Azure? Well, there's great ways to onboard these solutions, especially in the Azure Sentinel space. And if you're not familiar with Kusto, you're not familiar with how to position any of the workbooks or how to think through any of the dashboards, that community component is really important, because it'll give you templates and it'll give you kind of guides of ways to showcase your data so that your security operations team knows the full-blown security posture and can help kind of triage or fix, course correct any sort of attack if it's happening in real time.
So let's talk about the Microsoft Intelligent Security Graph. I alluded to it a little bit a few slides ago, but let's talk about what it really is and what it really does. So obviously, Microsoft is, went too far, hold on. Microsoft is obviously a global IT company. They have irons in the fire, so to speak, all over the world in terms of all of their data center, all of the data centers that are in place, all of the resources and people that they have across the world globally that are built for and focus on security and security intelligence. And you can see on this slide that the visibility and insight, 6.5 trillion diverse threat signals analyzed daily through the intelligence security graph. And this intelligence security graph is made up of the Microsoft security professionals, their operations analysts, but it's also all of the machine learning pieces that go into that. And the machine learning pieces provide the ability then, for all of this information that is being scanned through Windows devices, that is part of, reading what's going on with authentication and authorization, identity and access management within the Microsoft ecosystem, web pages hosting in the Microsoft environment, emails that are going through the Outlook and Exchange systems, builds all of this information, in these billions and billions of amounts of data that is going through Microsoft, is going through this intelligent security graph and being analyzed for anomalous behavior, and building these different machine learning models to help speed up detection, to help detect threats before they happen in a lot of cases. And you can see, down at the bottom left here, 5 billion threats are detected on devices every month within the Microsoft ecosystem. And so this all goes into that intelligence security graph, and the intelligence security graph is the foundation of Azure Sentinel, of really part of Azure Security Center and all security services within Microsoft, within Azure, within Microsoft 365, Dynamics, SharePoint, whatever, Power Platform, all of anything that's around security and security governance and security detection, analysis, and response is tied into this intelligence security graph. So it's a very powerful piece of the puzzle, all that is really doing all of this work in the background that makes our lives easier when we're utilizing the tools that are being provided to us on the Microsoft cloud platforms. And here's just really all of those pieces and what really goes into that. And you can very easily read the slide yourself, but you can see down here at the bottom some of the things that I mentioned already. Azure Security Center and Azure Sentinel, is the key piece in what we're talking about. What we've talked about with today with Azure Sentinel, and what we've talked about in some of the past talks around Azure Security Center. We've also talked about Microsoft Defender and threat protection within the environment. That is all part of what is utilizing the intelligence security graph, and the information that's even coming in there, and the services that they're protecting is gathering more and more information and providing more data into the security graph to be collected, to be analyzed, to be normalized, and continuously again train those machine learning models on how we're going to detect and respond and protect, and find threats and find vulnerabilities in our environments. And all of that then ties into numerous APIs that we can then tie to third-party services, and not just within the Microsoft services, and protect our on-premises, our AWS, our Google, our multi-cloud environments can all be protected utilizing this the intelligence security graph through Azure Sentinel and other services within Microsoft's cloud. And I think, Shannon, you're going to talk about the Security Operations Center, correct?
Correct. So
Did you lose your camera, Shannon?
Oh, did I lose my camera?
It appears you've lost your camera.
Oh no. Hang on, let me see.
Please pause while we experience technical difficulties.
Let me try it again. Yeah, because it says it's. Am I back?
You are back. All right, now
okay,
I can
sorry about that.
Not your problem. It's a technical security glitch. Maybe the security graph was finding an anomaly or something.
I just got a brand new webcam, and I feel like I'm still trying to get acclimated to it. So sorry about that.
It was that creepy fella that's behind you in your background.
Right? Yeah, we gotta watch out for this guy.
Seeing the ones and the zeros in the background with the hoodie on, it just set the intelligent security graph a buzz and just said, I gotta shut this down.
Right, exactly. So yeah, so I think folks are pretty familiar with the Network Operations Center, right? So the other side of it is the Security Operations Center, or the SOC. So if we're looking at the reference architecture, and I don't know if you want to move it ahead one. Yeah, there we go. So
hold on, I'm jumping all around here. My mouse wasn't responding on me there, so
we're having all
sorts of technical difficulties
today.
Yeah, all good. There we go.
So I used to hear from customers, oh, Sentinel's around, Azure Security Center is going to go away, right? And that's so not the case, right? You really do need both. So if you want to detect like a crypto miner in your Linux VM, you're going to want to enable Azure Security Center. Likewise, if you want to get best practices and the right way to configure your environment, you're going to want to enable Azure Security Center. But if you want to coordinate your security operations centrally and aggregate multiple security solutions like Azure Security Center, you need to go like threat hunting, right? You need to think about expanding what that looks like. You want to think about Microsoft's Cloud App Security, Azure ATP, and others. You'll want to enable Azure Sentinel because that really does provide that single pane of glass. So the responsibility of the security operations team is to rapidly detect, prioritize, and triage potential attacks. So these operations help eliminate false positives. You can focus on the real attacks, and that reduces the mean time to remediate or to reach a resolution. So central SecOps teams monitor security-related telemetry data, and they'll investigate the security breaches. So it's important that any communication, investigation, and hunting activities are aligned with the application team. So you can imagine if you're thinking about your environment, living on-prem, living in Azure, trying to manage those security events, it's hard because you might have PaaS environments, you might have SaaS environments, you probably have IaaS environments, and you probably have VMs on-prem, or maybe even physical servers as well. You might have network devices that you want to get some information on. So, this is a great reference architecture because it showcases that Azure Sentinel can really be that SIEM that aggregates all that log data. So everything from the raw logs, it'll apply the deep insights. You've got security and network third-party solutions that can be plugged into the mix. You've got your hybrid scenarios, your identity and access management, both Microsoft first-party and third-party, endpoint and mobile. Those logs can be ingested in, and then your actual analyst or your SOC team member can start to put all that together. And you could think about leaning on your classic managed services or managed security providers because they still have a solution or a series of solutions that could be plugged in. But having Sentinel at your disposal and choosing to enable it really starts to empower those folks that may not have Dwayne's background, right? The CISSP background, so that they can start to make sense of what they're doing without having to 100% lean on your managed security provider. So it starts to give and empower your actual SOC folks so that they're able to, I guess, remediate and secure your environment. So in terms of the visibility, so this diagram really provides a conceptual overview of the security logs and alerts, right? So as you can see, security visibility is fairly vast if you lean on any sort of SIEM, right? And we always stress Azure Sentinel, but there are third-party SIEMs you can deploy into the mix here. But the big piece here is to enable Azure Security Center for the high-quality alerts, forward that or feed it into your SIEM, Azure Security Center will provide the anomaly detection, the behavioral analytics, and the fusion across sources, and it'll integrate with partner solutions. You can also have Sentinel do some of that as well. It's interesting. They're very much so, they're not quite twins. Maybe they're fraternal twins, right? They don't look the exact same, but they have features that are very similar. So you can tell they're very related, and they're very much so partnered up in the security side of the Azure ecosystem. So you can always integrate additional logs as needed as well. And then if you think about it, there's a number of different ingestion points as well. You don't have to just focus on your VMs or your physical servers. You could focus on your PaaS estate, your IaaS estate, your blob storage, your authentication mechanisms, right? It's pretty vast in terms of what you're able to capture. And you can think about a number of different components here that you could hopefully track and triage to make sure that your security posture is 100% aligned.
Yeah, I think at this point, I think that's our last slide. I think we're going to jump in here into Azure Sentinel a little bit, right, Shannon?
Right, exactly. So let me share my screen. Let me pick the right screen. Okay, cool. So I think you're where you want to be. Okay, so let's dig into what Azure Sentinel looks like. So when you click on Azure Sentinel, it'll take you in here. You could always add a brand new one. It's going to add Azure Sentinel to a workspace. And this may or may not load quickly. If it doesn't, then it just showcases that you tie it to a log analytics workspace. Maybe it's everybody. Here we go. Yeah, so these are all of the workspaces within the subscriptions I have access to. That don't have Azure Sentinel tied to it, right? So I've did some experimentation in my delete me resource group. So I could always add that in there, right? Nothing's reporting in there, so it wouldn't really give me any features, but it's as simple as you tie it to there, you hit add, or you can create a brand new workspace, right? Tie it to the right resource group, the right region, etc. So that's kind of cool. I'm going to go into a log analytics workspace that has Sentinel involved, or it's Sentinel deployed. And this is the overview blade, right? So just like a lot of other Azure resources, you have the overview blade. It's kind of the finger on the pulse, so to speak. So if you go into like Azure Monitor for VMs, VM Insights, you start to get some of the similar looking data. Same thing exists inside of Sentinel because it's pulling from the same log analytics workspace. It's getting a lot of different types of data, right? And the security event itself, so let's just say you were curious, you wanted to click on this. What type of security events is it measuring? It'll measure every security event. This might take a little bit of time to run, but you see that it's grabbing all security events across everything inside this environment. And notice how I'm in a log analytics workspace. And this, in theory, should take a couple more seconds to run. But it hopefully showcases that at the start, you could literally start digging into the security posture in your environment without knowing much more than union space security event, right? And I'm getting info on Azure Active Directory. It's my DirSync server, although it's not DirSync anymore. I do need to rename that server at some point. It's been upgraded, but I haven't renamed the server. But yeah, there's a security piece here that's being logged, and it's just an event, right? So it's not an alert, it's an event. So Sentinel at least tells you it's just an event, right? The alerts, if you clicked on alert, now nothing's going to show up, but it'll take you into log analytics the same way. And then down here, if any events get triggered, this will showcase the potential malicious events. The unfortunate reality that I discovered in terms of getting all of this prepped for today is all of our older subscriptions that we used to use for demoing Azure Security Center and Azure Sentinel, they've sort of been cleaned up, and none of them have any malicious events. So I know we're always adjusting and changing this so that we can showcase things to customers or potential customers. But in the event that you have an alert triggered up here, it'll showcase where it was triggered. And you can start drilling in by clicking on, it's a circle that'll show up, either red or orange, depending upon the severity of the alert. You can start drilling in and figuring out exactly what's showing up. These are data source anomalies. I never find them super helpful, but it's a start, right? Here we are in log analytics. Let's see, I was playing around with it earlier. So this is the one. So I'll run it. So maybe you want to see security events, right, as you're threat hunting. You noticed a user account was compromised or seemingly compromised. You know, this is a pretty straightforward thing. You can always add this, you can save this, you can share this, you can create an alert rule, you can pin this to a dashboard, you can add this into your queries. So these are the fact that you've got log analytics that could really just be drawn out at the gate, kind of out the gate once you're inside of Azure Sentinel is pretty powerful. And as you become more familiar with the Kusto query language, there's a lot of great Learn modules out now, as well as a lot of good documentation. You'll start to be able to fine tune these. This is the news and guides. So this is all of the brand new recent news. Usually these are tech community blog posts or regular Azure blog posts, right? This is the getting started. So you can literally go down to, I mean, you could click down here too, but if you wanted to bypass that, you could click on connect and boom, you're in data connectors, right? So the what's new, the getting started, these are always great spots to start. This is the incident side of things. Now, no incidents were found, and I think a lot of that's because we're trying to apply a lot of security policies against our internal subscriptions so that we don't do risky things like put a public IP on a VM that's accessible and potentially go through a port scan by anybody in the kind of broader realm. But this will help you figure out exactly what's going on in your environment, and it would show up in here. But since I don't have anything, it's just kind of showing what is it, how does it work? And so in the event that something were to get generated down the road, it would show up here and it'd be a fast way in to take a look at the incidents. These are the workbooks, those dashboards. I don't have a lot of, I don't think I have any workbooks because I recently realized I had this on the wrong log analytics workspace, but these are great ones. So, look at this one, Azure Security Center Compliance and Protection. Looks kind of like something we showcased a couple of weeks back. So you could literally view the template, make sure you tie it to the right subscription and the right workspace. And it looks very similar. So you get the alerts and incidents, you get the compliance and posture, the endpoint updates and protection. I'm not sure what that's for. If Qualsys has been in any side of Qualsys shows up there. So it's just interesting. Now you could always save this as well. So you could add this into your environment and have it display as a workbook, right? So that's a really cool reality in terms of visualization. And there's a number of different ones in here too. So Exchange compromise hunting. If you're running Exchange on-prem and you've got agents installed on those Exchange servers, you can start, enabling this in your environment. You can take a look at Exchange Online, right? F5, GitHub security, right? So there's a lot of really good templates that are in here. pfSense, Qualsys. So I mean, really, and this keeps growing. I was actually shocked at how many different templates were in here from the last time I did a very heavy demo. So this grows, and I suspect a lot of it's because of community adoption and just working with third-party vendors as well. Here's the hunting side of things. These are your predefined queries. Let's go down here. Let's find a good one. Let's do 80 account lockout. The query will display here. In theory, I don't know. Have you had I've had a tough time today getting some of this stuff to load.
Yeah, sometimes Azure Security Center and Sentinel sometimes load. I'm in some of mine and it's not that bad, but it's probably just the amount of logs in your shared tenants.
Probably, right? Well, the reality is a query shows up here. You can view the results and go into log analytics. You can copy and paste this out. You can experiment with the data that comes out. Let's see if I can get one to actually show up. Let's see. Maybe this one. Let's see if this will display. And if it won't, just know that in normal times, I refresh this and close out of it multiple times because I was noticing this earlier today. But yeah, the query will show up and it'll be a pretty expansive query. And there's usually, so like in PowerShell, for instance, if you were to add comments in, it would be done with a £. In Kusto query, it's the reverse whack. So 2 of those will make it green. And a lot of these have some great written dialogue in there, so you know exactly what that query is doing. And then if you get more familiar with Kusto, you can start to adjust or edit those queries to get the information that you're looking for. So it looks like it doesn't want to load, Dwayne. So I'll keep going down the list here, but know that these are great ones to lean on, and you can always create a new query, right? This is where you would plug it in. Normally this would load. For some reason it doesn't want to load today, but you could always add your own in as well. So as you become more sophisticated with Kusto, you become more sophisticated with what you want to see, and it's an evolution. You're not going to be hitting the ground running instantaneously with Kusto, but as you become more familiar with the language, more familiar with the way to extrapolate data from your environment, you can add your own custom hunting queries as well.
Yeah, you want to pass control over to me, because I'm getting some of that's coming into mine.
Yeah, let's do this. So I'll stop. Yeah,
there's a couple things I wanted to show that came into my Sentinel environment.
Go for it. I'll try and refresh mine, see if maybe that's what I need.
All right, let's see here.
So I stopped sharing, so you should be able to share now.
Yep, I'm getting there.
Oh, that's what I needed to do, was close out, and now it's loading. That's all right. Dwayne can show. Dwayne.
Yeah, let me show a couple things. Yeah, there's a couple things I wanted to show anyway, so let me pull them over here.
Yeah, this is a trickier thing for the internal subscriptions to showcase at Microsoft because of the way that we lock these security things down internally.
Yeah, hold on one second. I think I shared instead of sharing the desktop, I shared the actual screen. There we go. All right, let's get that. All right, let's send me live here. And here, so couple things to show here as well that I thought would be a good idea to showcase. So I don't have a whole lot in my demo environment, but I do have some things, in terms of my environment. I turned on a couple weeks ago some endpoint manager and Intune and cloud, and with that Intune came Cloud App Security. You can see here there's actually a big spike in activity here, and when I click on this log here, this actually shows a shadow IT report for my managed devices. So this is pulling right out of, I've got my data connector from Azure Sentinel and I have Azure Sentinel set in MCAS, which is Microsoft Cloud App Security, the cloud security broker. I have them tied together. I have Azure Sentinel set as my SIEM within MCAS, and so it's taking what MCAS is gathering in terms of the applications that I'm accessing that are being accessed on my Intune managed devices, and it's pulling this report in here. This report was gathered, at one day. It was, ultimately, if we look at the date here, on 5/28, so it was actually just generated this morning, and shows then on my four machines that I have running, have in this in MCAS, it is pulling the applications that are on those, that have been run on those machines. And it actually, if anybody's familiar with Cloud App Security, applications are given a cloud score based on their compliance and safe and security. Essentially are given a score, and obviously 10 is generally a pretty good score. But I've got a few in here, like Wikipedia, that's running at a 4, and I can look at this and find out, what were you doing and what is going on in my environment through this shadow IT report. So if you're running an enterprise that has strict rules in terms of what applications can be used, you can get this report pulled right into Azure Sentinel, and it will show up, and you can then identify maybe information and applications that you want to turn off. The other thing that was interesting, and I know I was able to pull up that query that you were able to pull up, that you weren't able to pull up, Shannon, for the user accounts here in the security group, and as Shannon was mentioning, here's like the comments on, giving some information around what those are and everything like that. But the other thing I wanted to show was I was doing a class last week, and I had some security alerts that popped up, and I noticed this when I was doing the class as well, that I was getting some alerts sent to me that there were some brute force attacks. Obviously, if anybody's ever done and brute force password dictionary attacks, and if anybody's ever done a demo, generally when we're doing demos and we're doing labs, we don't use the most secure passwords, and they're pretty common passwords. I know Shannon's probably done some open hacks where they haven't been the most secure passwords. And I always think it's funny when I'm doing a security class or a security based workshop or open hack that we're using pretty mundane passwords. Well, one of those a bunch of those passwords were getting hit last week. And so coming in through Security Center, we were getting these brute force attacks, and I had set the same environment up and deployed that environment in my demo tenant, and you can see I've got some brute force attacks and telling me different recommendation steps to remediate that I need to enforce the use of strong passwords. So I'm getting data out of just this real simple query of what's coming, and this is just a query that's, again, part of that automation and those SOAR capabilities within Azure Sentinel, that's really telling me things that I've got configured that probably aren't the best case. Now I know where these are coming from, because the only VMs that I have running in my environment are VMs that are used for demos and labs and things like that. But it was kind of interesting that I was getting brute force dictionary attacks all of a sudden. So somebody was deciding to go in and scan and attack demo VMs with dictionary attacks. So
how funny.
You can see here, I got you can tell it's a demo account, because here's my corporate.contoso. Another well-known Microsoft demo company name. So yep. But this is just just some things around the power of Sentinel, and this was just from having some very small, just very limited number of connectors within the Sentinel environment. If I go to my data connectors, it's probably less than 10 that I have connected. But the ones that I have connected, obviously, are actually giving. Actually, it's 2 right now, because I go up and down depending on what I'm doing in terms of classes. And it's Azure Defender. So I've got which is part of Azure Security Center, obviously, if you recall us talking about that. And it is my Microsoft Cloud App Security. And from both of those, I'm getting data coming into Azure Sentinel.
Yeah, but it's interesting how many data connectors show up, because every time I go and I check, and it's every so often, it keeps going up. So that
it was under 100 a month ago.
Yeah, and it's just crazy how many data connectors are coming in. So it shows that Microsoft's willing to work with just about any security vendor out there. And there's probably a roadmap even for ones that don't show up on here. So if you have a third-party solution, talk to your vendor, see if they're working with Microsoft. And if you want to bring that into Azure, or you want to have Azure Sentinel ingest logs, it's a unique opportunity for that to be another option to show up here, right? Because
and for those third-party services, if you go to that open connector page, it gives you all of that information that you need to get that connector working within the Azure Sentinel environment. And now I'm seeing the lag, so here it comes. Here we go. So
glad I'm not alone, though.
Yeah, it tells you those prerequisites. So if you need certain permissions, it's going to let you know that, and then it's going to take you through those configurations, and it's going to let you know what you need to do in terms of those connections for CloudTrail and Sentinel. There's a link actually right here to a Microsoft Docs document that takes you step by step what you need to do in AWS to tie CloudTrail into Sentinel. Very simple. I've done it myself. Just in a demo previously, and it's just very easy. You just need to be able to, you need to set a few things up in AWS for to give read rights to cloud, to to Sentinel within CloudTrail, and then you need to just plug in the Microsoft accounts, plug in that role from AWS, and you're off and running.
Yeah.
So very easy there. So anything else we want to show out of Sentinel? I think we've hit most of
that's pretty much it. I think the only other thing is the automation blade, and that's where you just would essentially add your playbooks. And there are, I think, some pre-populated ones that are in there. If not, yeah, there are.
There aren't, but there is. I know there's a GitHub with many of these.
Actually, it's the now that I think about it, it's the community link on the left. If you want to click on the community link at the
yes,
that, and you can scroll down to the blue button, that's where you'll go. And that'll take you to the GitHub repo, and that's where you're going to grab the playbooks. So
here you got playbooks right there.
Yeah, and it's super awesome because you're never starting from scratch. It's just like most things in Azure, right? Everything from the ARM, quick start templates to all of the Kusto queries inside of Azure Monitor, as well as Azure Security Center has its own repo. Now Azure Sentinel does as well, and this is super awesome to showcase because of the fact I think it really hits home that you're never starting from scratch. What you do is you take something like a template and you add your own flavor if you want it, or you just take the template and use it, right? Because a lot of the templates have a lot of real granular info that would be relevant to you.
Yeah, and you can see it's not just the playbooks. There's notebooks. There's the workbooks in here. There's hunting queries.
Yep.
All of that is in here. Different data connectors in here as well. So, lots of information in this repo. So you can, like I said previously, as to why Azure Sentinel. There's just so much out there that the community's built as well as Microsoft's built that gets you up and going very, very quickly and easily. As I showed, I have 2 connectors connected. I'm getting alerts and I'm getting information into it. You can be up and running very quickly in starting to gather information, even if you're not not necessarily alerting, even though I got some security alerts, that I haven't tied that to, any kind of automation to create incidents and things like that. It's a demo environment. I'm not running a SOC. So, so not important to me. But other than that, we're good. But I think that brings us to the end here.
It does.
And let me close all my windows that I got thrown in the front here. And so, hopefully you enjoyed. We gave gave everybody an introduction of what a security information events management system and a security orchestration and automation response system is, and why Azure Sentinel fits the mold of both of those all in one in a cloud native, highly scalable infrastructure, how it works, how it ties into that Microsoft Intelligence Security Graph, and how powerful that is for gaining intelligence and training, getting constantly trained intelligence at a worldwide level. And then, how then that can all tie into how you manage yourself and your enterprise and company in terms of your, in building and creating that security operations center to properly investigate and respond to threats within your organization. So thanks everybody for attending this this Skill Me Up expert talk. And I am Dwayne Natwick.
And I'm Shannon Kuehn.
And join us next time. We'll be back and do another talk in a couple weeks, finishing up again this security series. And it's been fun, and we look forward to wrapping this up and maybe in the future find another series that we can do together.
There you go. Yeah. And we'll have to figure out something, won't we?
All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.